Hi everyone and welcome to Wargame Red Dragon today. So, Steam Summer Sale, lots of stuff on sale, all the EUGEN games, all the DLCs, even the new Warno, while still in early access, has a 25% discount right now. But I finally decided to pick up Isreal because it was really cheap. It's never been a side I particularly looked at and went, I really want to own that deck. However, since it was on sale and it's very cheap right now, I think it cost me just over £1, I thought, why not? Let's grab it, let's see how it plays out when we build a deck with it. So I've had a quick look through the units because I don't know the deck at all. Obviously you come up against them in multiplayer and you think, oh, I don't like that unit, it's a pain, or that one I'm not too bothered. But you know, looking through the deck, it has some really strong units, some reasonably weak units, and some things that are missing which I would expect them to have but they don't. But let's go through it. Let's build a deck. Again, it's for 10v10 tactical. You can adapt it as you see fit. And I've never played with these units before, so I don't know them. Whereas when I go into other decks, I've usually played a lot of the units one way or the other before. So I have some understanding in my mind how good they are. But this is going to be completely different for me. So please do feel free to comment down below if you think I've made a poor decision and what you would pick instead and why you would pick it. Because obviously Infantry in particular are a bit of a weird one in this deck. But let's have a look first at command. So there's a really weird set of commands here. So obviously you've got the Infantry command. They come in so many different vehicles, it's not even funny. I mean, I'm really loving this vehicle, which has 3 machine guns on top, which would be fantastic supporting as, you know, fire support for your troops. You got the Zelda, which is basically the same, which, you know, the only difference really is it's a bit slower and it has more armor. And then you've got this thing, which has just 2 machine guns, but it is basically a tank shell with what I can only describe as a huge machine gun mount on top with lots of bulletproof glass. I mean, that is very, very much what the Americans had on their Humvees in, you know, the Middle East and stuff. Then you've got this thing, which is, again, a little tank shell, which has 3 machine guns on it. And then you've got a Macarva, which was probably the biggest surprise to me, was that these infantry can come in a Macarva, which seems crazy to me, but that's pretty cool. And what was even more amazing to me is that some 10-man squads can come in the Macarva, which that is a very tight space for a 10-man squad, I must say. But we'll get to that when we get to infantry. Then you've got your standard vehicle. This is just kind of a little Jeep. You've got this thing, which is a small, very old-fashioned looking vehicle with a machine gun on top. It almost looks a bit like a BTR, to be honest, but not quite. And then you've got this thing here, which is obviously an M113 command, just with a different name. You've got this thing, which again is the tank shell. And then you've got a very nice Macarva command, which isn't bad. It's 160 points, so it's quite expensive. Decent armor. Not a great AP power on that. I mean, this thing is basically the cheapest Macarva available. So I'm not exactly enthused about taking that, to be honest. You've got the usual chopper command, but you know how I feel about those. They get blown up a lot. Fob, obviously, and then supply, you've got a little truck, a big truck, and a big chopper, which isn't badly priced, to be honest, at 35 points. But let's have a look. I like my infantry commanders because I can stick them in towns. That is the cheapest option, along with this thing. This is probably going to be the fastest because it's a little truck. That said, it's only 50 speed off-road. And the Bandanner is 70 off-road. So, you know, actually, I'd take that because it's got so many machine guns. At least it can provide a little bit of defense to your guys. So let's take that. 3 trained. Makes no odds. I mean, you could potentially take another command here because you're only getting 3 of them. But obviously, it's a 10v10 tactical. So hopefully, you're going to have 10 and not going to be bringing in many more commands during a game. So, yes, if you were building this deck and you were doing it for 1v1s or 2v2s or 3v3s, yes, you'd be thinking about taking something else. Then maybe you would think about taking the tank because it's got a bit of armor. I'd certainly consider something with a bit of armor in those situations so it can, you know, take a few shots. Maybe that's not a bad choice, but then for 30 points more, you at least get a gun. So maybe the tank in that situation's a better idea. But we're going to move on because we're only going to take that one. We're going to take a fob as always, because why wouldn't you? It's nice to have the option. And then here we have the 2 trucks. I mean, you always want supply at the end of the day. You get 11 of those, you get 6 of those. They're a bit more expensive. I always like a cheap option in 10v10s when it's trickling in points, and a more expensive option. That's pretty much how all my decks go, I think. Again, I avoid the choppers. Now, I like a man-pad squad, and you have a couple of choices here. You have these guys, which have a stinger, and these guys, which have the red eye. We're going to avoid the red eye, obviously. These are only 15 points, 10 points to come in a vehicle with a gun, 5 points to come in this thing again. I mean, 110 kilometers per hour, 150 kilometers per hour, and 110 kilometers per hour. I mean, that's the same price, but it has a bit more armor. And these guys are probably going to go more towards the front line. So I suppose that is a benefit. It's a little bit slower across the ground though. But I'm tempted by both of these vehicles, because I always think, well, if I drop these guys off in a town, then the vehicle can be sent to support troops that are pushing somewhere else. So let's go with the Zelda, because it's got a fast enough speed on the road that it's still going to get to towns. Yeah, it's not going to race to the front lines, but I think you have to accept that the Israeli deck isn't necessarily going to be at the front lines immediately. And then we have trained and we have hardened. I mean, 7 hardened I think is more than enough for any game that I'm going to play. Obviously, as always, tactical games, you're trying to bring in higher quality units where possible, depending on how long you think a game's going to go on. There are times when I struggle with infantry, but most of the time it's fine. You got the Doorbell, which is a spike. We're going to take the spike, obviously, because it's a spike. It can come in a chopper. It can come in... I mean, the choppers aren't bad for 20 points, but we want something cheaper. I mean, the only problem is that, again, you're not getting to the front line very quickly. You're going to have to take the BTR, which is 10 points to get there quickly. And I really don't want to spend 10 points on that vehicle when I can have a Bandanner with many more guns. So I'm going to take that, the 5-point vehicle. I'm not going to take 400. I'm going to take trained. They're accurate enough, and you can go through these in a game because, you know, people do go out their way to kill them. They are quite good. Not as fast as they used to be, but still pretty good. These guys, just dragons, and dragons don't really do it for me, so I'm going to skip over them. They're only a 5-man squad anyway. And then you've got these guys, the Jivati. Shock troops, 15-man squad. We like a 15-man squad. They're 25 points. I don't think that's bad. Again, they come in a weird set of vehicles. I find it very weird that this 15-man squad fits in a Humvee, because that's what a hammer is, isn't it? Let's be honest, that is a Humvee. There's no two ways about it, and there aren't 15 seats in there. So that's quite impressive. I mean, I know there's not necessarily a fixed thing in Wargame that the sizes necessarily match, but that does seem a bit silly. But I'm actually, you know, again, it's a 10-point vehicle, but it's pretty fast. Whereas you've got these things, which are not as fast, but have so many guns on. I can't not take those, and I'm just going to take hardened, because then I get 15 of them. I just feel like, you know, any 15-man squad that's shock is good in this game. And if you bring it in this vehicle, the firepower it's got, 3 machine guns is great. I mean, okay, it's not the South African pew-pew laser machines, but still pretty good. These guys have a Mark 19 grenade launcher. It's a pretty good range as well. I mean, this should absolutely tear apart other infantry. My only complaint is they're a 5-man squad, and I almost wish that I could have a 10-man squad and pay 25 for them or something. But I think they're really good. And they come in a really interesting set of vehicles again. You know, you've got all the tank options, basically. And that's only 10 points for something with multiple machine guns. I mean, they've got Uzis, so they're close range combatants, if, you know, it's going to happen. Really, you want to keep these guys at range. You can even bring them in a Macarva. I mean, isn't that insane? So much stuff can come in a Macarva here. I'm I'm kind of accepting that everything's going to be slow in this deck. So I actually kind of want to try these guys out. But I've only got 2 slots left, which is a big issue. So let's come back to them. Let's come back to them. It might be that we drop the stingers and accept that we take more support-based stuff. So you got these guys, which are militia. We're probably just going to skip over those. These guys, 10-man squad, they can come in a Macarva. And you have those guys, which are the standards, and then these guys, which are the 90 variant. So they are... Technically, I would have thought these guys should be experimental or whatever, but they're not. Even though they're, like, you know, 90 onwards. And weapons-wise, I mean... They've got a better launcher, obviously. Machine guns here, there, and they got an M16 rather than a FAL. I mean, they've got advantages and disadvantages to both, so I can kind of see why they're the same price. What amused me is they're a 10-man squad that can come in the Macarva. I mean, are all those guys going to fit in there? Maybe. It's going to be a squeeze with all the technology that's in there. You got these guys, which are your elite troops, 10-man squad again. They come in either a hammer or a chopper choice. I mean, these guys are pretty good. They got a nice launcher with a decent range, good accuracy, good AP power, PKM, AK. They're all right. And chopper-wise, I'm just having a quick look. They do have that one with a Nimrod, which is obviously a pretty good anti-ground missile. Long range on it. But it is expensive. And I'm trying to think when I'd use it. I don't trust choppers, ever. Then you got these guys, which are 20 points. Shock troops again, but we've already got some shock troops, and we've got 15-man squads. So we'll stick with that. You get these guys, which are technically a prototype, finally. These are experimental prototype infantry, because they're 95. I'm pretty sure they're 90 should be as well. These guys come in a hammer, and they again have... pretty decent launcher. Got a car 15. It's alright. And they got the FN mag. I mean, decent infantry squad, but 10-man shock squad. I'd rather have the 15-man squad. I kind of want to take a squad of these guys because they do have that nice launcher. 30 points for elite, you see. It's the elite that I'm liking there. These guys are only shock. How many of them do we get? 9 or 7. And then we get 13 or 9. I kind of want to take those in the hammer and take 9. Yeah, let's do that. And we've got a slot left there. And as I say, I really want to try these guys in the Mark 19, but then I feel like I've not got a lot of infantry. I certainly don't have any cheap infantry. So you know what's going to happen here is I'm going to delete the stingers. I'm going to accept that in this deck I will not have a man pad. And it does happen. There are decks of mine without man pads. Let's find some cheap infantry. I'm going to take these guys, because they're only 10 points. I want something cheap. They're going to come in this cheap vehicle again. I'm not going to bring them in a Macarva, as tempting as that is, to be honest. And it is very tempting to bring them in that Macarva. 7 and 9. How many of these guys do you get if you bring them in that? 7 and 9. I really want cheap infantry that are 15 points, so I'm going to take those guys, and I'm going to take trained and 18, so I can just spam them. And then these guys, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring them in the Macarva as trained. And then I've got those guys with a Mark 19 and the Macarva with a Mark 19, and this should be a squad that will devastate infantry at range. I mean, absolutely melt infantry at range. That is the plan with these guys. An expensive melting infantry at range. We'll see how that pans out. Okay, support. This is going to be an interesting one, because support is really weird here. There's a lot to choose from, and there's a lot of stuff that I have either never seen in action, so I don't know actually what it does, so I'm going to pick some weird choices. So if you have suggestions here, please do post them in the comments, because honestly, this is where I come a bit unstuck. I really have never obviously played these units, so I don't know much about the artillery here, more than anything else. Now, This thing I've seen in use. I know it's pretty reasonable. It's got the Vulcan cannon and it's got the Stingers, and that's not bad at all. I'm tempted to take that. The Hover is just a Vulcan, and this thing is just a cannon. They're cheap, but I'm not really fussed. The Dragon looks pretty nice. It's fire and forget. It's got a really good range against helicopters. It's got 12 missiles, and it's only 55. I think that's a pretty good one, so I'm going to stick that in straight away. It's only got 45 accuracy, so I'd be tempted to take 4 hardened and just be careful with them. Because I think in a 10v10 tactical, that should be enough if you're going to take other AA. I'm going to continue on to the further AA, because obviously we can come back to artillery and stuff. So down here you've got the Shinav. Either way, you've got the 1 and the 2. They're basically Eyehawks. And, you know, one has good range and one has better range against helicopters. Again, the radar these, so you want to be careful with them. You can either have 4 or 3. I think even 4 trained to those would be fantastic, you know, to back up those things at 55 points. So I'd actually take the more expensive ones there. I'd take trained. You're going to have to supply these pretty early because they only get 3 rockets each, but they should be pretty good. I mean, at this point, you could even say you take this for anti-air as well, but I'm hoping in a 10v10 tactical, if you play sensibly and move them after they fire, this should be enough. If it's not, you're in trouble. But you have fantastic aircraft, so I would be relying on those more than I would my anti-air probably. But we'll get to the aircraft. So then we've got choices of mortars. It's always good to have some mortars. These ones are 30 points and they're 81mm, which is pretty good, to be fair. And these are 160mm, which are obviously going to do a lot of damage. But I'm kind of thinking in this deck, I'd rather take mortars, 7 trained, just for their smoking capability. Because now we're going to look at the artillery, and there's a lot to choose from here. I mean, I'm quite impressed by the selection. So you got the MAR 240, which is a napalm launcher. It only does 1 HE power though, which isn't a lot. It's certainly obviously not a Buratino. But, you know, 36 rounds, 240mm rockets. I mean, it's got to be impressive in the amount of damage it does. But again, I'm not convinced I've necessarily seen it used. So I don't know if it's any good. What did catch my eye, however, were the MAR 290s. 15 HE power rockets, 290mm rockets. You only get 4 of them. But obviously the dispersion's pretty good. They look like they do a lot of damage. I'm tempted to put them in and try it. And then you've got the LAR 160, which is your cluster artillery. I mean, it's not a smirch at the end of the day. It's only got an AP power of 4. It does a bit of damage, but again, it's not jumping out at me. I'm very tempted to try that, the MAR 290. However, you also get quite a wide array of standard artillery pieces. So you've got this thing, which is 155mm standard NATO rounds, which is pretty nice. I'm sure this is probably some variant of an American one. And then you've got this thing, which, the Rochev and the Dua. And this is like an upgraded version of the other one. Quite a bit more expensive, but obviously much improved range. Same HE power though, but slightly faster firing at 5 instead of 4 rounds per minute. And then down here, you've also got another one, which is 120 points. And this, you know, screams Paladin to me. It's 155mm rounds, but it also has a tank gun option. It's got 12 front armor, and HE power is the same. Rate of fire is the same as the cheaper one. But it's, you know, it's basically dispersion being the issue there compared to the cheaper one. But it's kind of in between these two. So what you've got to decide here is whether you want a tank gun or not, and a lot of armor. There's the front armor that's pretty good. Top armor's 2. Top armor there's only 1. I think both of these are good options for standard artillery. The problem is you only get 2 of them. Those you get 3. Those you can have up to 4. You also get these as an option, which are your big heavy duty things. So this is your 175mm. Obviously 9 HE power, 2 rounds a minute. And then a Cardom, which is, again, it's pretty cheap. You can have up to 3 of them, reasonably accurate, 10 HE power. I think these would be devastating, to be honest. It's just the fact that they fire so slow. I think those would also be pretty good. I think they'd hit very hard. If you want to snipe some units, that's the way to go. But equally, I kind of like this one. I'm very torn. I kind of want to take this and try it. So I'm going to take train to those, just because I'm really curious how effective it is. Because 15 HE power is pretty darn good. I mean, that's better than the EUGEN with its 11. So, yeah, let's try it. And then let's move on, rather than spend another 3 points here, which I could easily do, because I'm very tempted by one of these 155mm ones. So tanks is a weird selection, again. I mean, the Macarva obviously being the best of the options here. Over at the top here, you've got the Magach. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so sorry, but these ones, they are basically your glass cannon. Other than the 100-point one, which has decent front armor, I like this one, which is 70 points, 12 front armor, 17 AP power, very glass cannon, decent accuracy, decent stabilizer, 10 rounds per minute. Maybe it's got some kind of autoloader on there. Nice little tank. This one, again, you know, it's the big difference if I just pin that one and then hover this one. So the big difference is obviously the armor on the front. And obviously you get an extra armor on top and the sides, but gun-wise it's only a slight improvement. It's all about the extra armor. Whether that's worth the extra 30 points is debatable. I mean, obviously your big boys are the Macarvas. So you got the Macarva here, the Baz, which is got the missile, which I do like a tank with a missile, so you know that's going in. I mean, I'm going to take 2 of those, because inevitably I'll get one blown up. But, you know, it's got heavy front armor, it's got heavy AP power, and it's got the missile. So, yes, we like that. The Macarva 3B, which, again, has the Mark 19 grenade launcher, and I mean, that's one of the beauties of these tanks, is that you do get the option of the grenade launcher, and grenade launcher is very good against infantry, so, you know, you're a little bit more confident about taking these into a forest and knowing you can maybe gun down or stun lock enemy infantry. So it's not a, you know, it's not a bad option to have a tank with a grenade launcher. And again, it's a pretty decent tank. It's quite expensive. I mean, you know, this is like you're playing a tank-heavy deck here if you're taking these. But I feel like one way to play this deck is to be kind of tank-heavy. I almost feel as if you could sort of get away with having a tank-based deck or an armor-based deck here, because they are quite good. That said, their aircraft are even better. So I'm tempted to take 3 train to those as well. In fact, you know, in a 10v10 tactical, let's take 2 hardened, just because it's probably rarely going to pull them out and have all of them on the field, because you're never going to have enough points. And then you need something cheaper, obviously. I mean, these things down the bottom here are just, you know, cheap nothings, to be honest. I mean, the HE power's 3, as with most tanks, so you could use it as fire support for that price with decent front armor. But, you know, you've got the Macarva 1 here, which has decent front armor, but it's 65 points, sorry. I was going to say 60. And its cannon's not amazing. And I'm kind of, you know, between these two, I would actually take the 70-point one. And then between these two, you're better off taking the 80-point Macarva, I think. So, but the thing is, that has a better... It's all about the gun here and whether you want a glass cannon. And I kind of feel like the Macarva is great because of its front armor. But the glass cannon option there is very nice. I'm tempted. I'm going to stick the glass cannon in. I don't know how good it is, but it's got, you know, a decent rate of fire. I feel like you could take 8 hardened of those and be pretty happy with that. I kind of don't want to fill all of these slots. I kind of want to get one more thing, and I kind of want to get something cheap. I'm very tempted by this 30.1, purely for the fact that it would be good fire support for infantry, because it's got 8 front armor. That's got 10 front armor. Let's have a think about that and have a look in vehicles, because I have remembered there is something interesting in vehicles. So let's move on and we'll come back. As I say, this is a bit of a confusing deck, so we're going to be here, there and everywhere, I think. So Recon, your choices are actually pretty miserable here, to be honest. Out of all of the things I would have expected for Isreal to have, I would have thought they had amazing Recon. Maybe that's more of a modern thing that they have. But the best thing here is by far the Maglans. They can either come in a little truck, They can come in a hammer, which is probably what I'd bring them in. They can also come in the ram recce, which is actually not a bad option because at least that is more recon, and I do like doing that. But it does add more expense. And they're already an expensive unit, and again, you can bring them in, but they have a spike. And a spike is a nice thing to have. They're very annoying, they're good at taking out vehicles. But like otherwise, they don't have any exceptional. It's all infantry with very good, and they have one vehicle with very good. They have the chopper with very good. But I'm very unenthused by the recon tank. It's not nice. I mean, probably the best recon vehicle they have is this thing, which can fire at, you know, ground and air targets with an autocannon. Twin autocannons. 20mm. Not bad. But yeah, I'm kind of limited in my options here, and so the Maglans are going in, and you know what? You really want something that's cheap as you can, so I think you want the Bedouins as something really cheap. So we're going to bring them in a 5-point vehicle. And again, you could bring them in with the weapons, but you're not going to use the weapons really, are you, for recon? But then, you know, the speed to the front is great, but the speed over land with that truck is terrible. That's got the best speed by far. You know what, screw it, let's do that then. I wasn't going to, but actually I'm going to do that. I'm going to take those guys in that because it has the fastest speed, and at least you can use it as another recon. And really, just take trained because it's recon. You're not going to be using them to fight. If you're going to use something to fight, you're going to use the Maglans. So yes, you could vet these up, but look at how few you get veteran anyway. We'll take these guys in something that make them pretty cheap because they're so expensive anyway. Kind of tempted to take... It's going to be the hammer. I'm going to pay the extra 10 points to take them in the hammer. I'm going to take veterans. They're good, but you're going to have to use them sparingly. And that's kind of limiting that you've only got 13 units there. So do you take this as well? And it's going to be handy against helicopters. But it is expensive with 45 points, isn't it? It's not exactly a cheap recon. Oh, that's challenging. I'm almost tempted to take more Maglans. I'm going to take the Maglans in the ram recce. I'm almost tempted to take them in a chopper, to be honest. To rush them. You know what? That's what we're going to do. Let's have the option to rush those Maglans somewhere or get behind enemy lines by putting them in a chopper. Let's do that. Let's do that. We don't do that very much these days in my decks that I've been playing lately. So let's do that. Move on to vehicles. So, interesting array of vehicles. Little truck with a tow. Hammer / Humvee with a tow. And a hammer with an Empats, which is Isreal's own version. It looks like a tow too from the outside, but the missile looks very different. But this one, again, you know, a bit like a tow too. Good range, good accuracy, lots of AP power. Can't go wrong with it, I suppose. You've also got these things, which have your toes on. You've got a couple of vehicles. This is, again, a Spike Helos, which has a really long range. Good accuracy, reasonable accuracy. Can fire on the move with a stabilizer. And has 27 AP power. That is going to wreck most stuff very quickly. I mean, this is impressive. And then you get this thing, which is a tank. But you can only use the missile launcher on the top, which seems a bit of a shame that you can't utilise its tank gun as well. I'd pay a little bit extra to use both. But it's literally a missile platform. And it's basically the same missile, but the thing I don't understand about it is it has completely different accuracy. It doesn't have much front armor considering it's a tank, and it looks like it's got plenty of extra armor added to it at the front. But it's only got 6. But I'm almost tempted to take it to try it, because I feel like the range on that is crazy. Let's do that. I mean, that's such a long range. And I don't think you need to take anything more than trained for that. And then you have the M51 I Sherman, which, I mean, it's just a wee little tank, isn't it, really, for 15 points. It's just got not got much front armor. So you know what, let's hop back to the tank deck, and let's take this 30 or 40.1. What do you reckon? I think we take the 40.1 for the extra accuracy and the extra armor, and I think we use that as fire support. And we can take 13 hardened. That's pretty good. Now we're going to skip back to Helos. As I say, jumping around a bit in this deck, apologies. It's not going to be quite as straightforward as some of my other deck builds. I think this chopper is really ugly. More for the fact that it's got these weird pods on the side for its tow missiles. It also got the MPATs as an option. Or MAPATs. You know, I just really think it's so ugly with those pods on. Then you've got this thing, which is called the Petten here, but it's obviously in, you know, an AH. Need we say any more? I mean, standard loadout, loads of Hellfires. I'm not a big fan because they're not fire and forget, so I don't tend to bring this in. This is obviously a Cobra with a different name, but it's, you know, the standard, lots of rockets. The only thing I don't really get about this one is that it's got 70mm rockets and 70mm rockets, but actually the tubes look different. It's almost like it's a mistake, and it should be 50 and 70 or 70 and 80 or 70 and I don't know, but yeah, it doesn't look right, the model. You know, usual Vulcan cannon on the front, and then you get this one which has stingers, 70 points. I'd take that because there are times when I wish in many of my decks I had an anti-air chopper at the start, but at least here you've got a cannon, some Hydra missiles or rockets, and the stinger option. You got a bit of everything there, just a little bit of harassment at the start, 4 of those. Am I bothered about anything else in this? I'm tempted to some extent by the rocket one, but I'm not going to use them, so I'm going to move on. Aircraft is where it's at for this deck. Now, as you might expect, Isreal has decent aircraft and lots of ECM and stuff like that. I was quite shocked when I clicked this, when I loaded into the aircraft and saw this one first. I was like, well, actually, that's not very good for a seed plane. Its ECM's a bit weak. Then I realised they have this one, which is slightly more expensive, obviously, the Kernus 2000, which is longer range seed, better accuracy, has 40% ECM and is much faster, and also has Sparrow, the AIM 7F Sparrow, which has 7,000 meter range. So basically, it's also an anti-air jet. And I'd take 2 rookie ones of those. I mean, you could take 1 elite if you wanted. And accept that if you lose it, you lose it. But I think its stats on its own are good enough without taking it as elite. And then you got the Baz, which is something you see brought out a lot. Which again has the Sparrow, 7,000 meter range. It's not the longest range. And then you get the Baz Meshufar. Again, probably pronouncing that wrong. This one has the same kind of missile, but it's called the Derby. And it's fire and forget. You get 4 of them, which I think is pretty good. The range on this isn't great, but I think that's pretty good. 40 ECM, exceptional air detection, 1,000 kilometers. I mean, just for the extra, you know, it's really expensive. I think that's why people bring the Baz, because it's cheap. As an option, it's not bad. I mean, they're both decent. But I am more tempted by that. But again, you're limited by what you can bring in. You can have 2 elite of the Baz, which seriously increases the accuracy of those missiles. We'll come back. We'll come back and have a think. You got the Kernus, which is obviously something that always makes an appearance in games. Very good. HE power 20. They are electro-optical missiles, fire and forget. And then you also get the option of the Ram, which has a HE power 10, has 4 Griffin bombs. Again, fire and forget, you know, again, very good. ECM 50, exceptional. they're both the same price. They bring slightly different things to the table, I suppose. That's got 10 HE power. That has 20, but it also has Sparrow missiles again. So if you do get into an air fight, that's the one you would want. So I know why now people take the Kernus. And again, I'm just going to take a rookie, because it's nice to have the option to bring out a spare. Again, you could take elite. Maybe you'll only ever bring one out in a game, but I have a feeling that I would quite often play this deck tank and air heavy rather than infantry spam. You get the Lavi, which is a very nice car per bomb. Look at that, 10 500 kilogram bombs is pretty nice. 15 HE power per bomb. I mean, again, 40% ECM, exceptional. 150 points again, but it's pretty good. 2 trained to those going in. I'm liking the options here. Then you've got a cluster bomber, which has 6 bombs. That's pretty good as well. 7 AP power. You got the Barrack, which obviously has your Mavericks, which, again, can't go wrong with Mavericks. And you have the Barrack 2, which is, well, I guess it's anti-air. But what's nice about that is, you know, 155 points, 50% ECM, exceptional speed for 1000. I mean, that's a pretty good jet as well. It's got the Derby, again, fire and forget missile. You only get 2 of them, though, here. And it's got your standard Python 4, which is also fire and forget, might I add. So, you know, plenty of options here. If we pin that and just compare it to the Baz up here, it's a difficult one. They've basically got similar loadouts. Obviously, the Barrack's got less missiles, but the Barrack 2 also has better ECM. I would honestly take the Barrack 2 for the fact it's 155 points. It's a bit cheaper, but overall, I think it's the fact it's got 10% more ECM that makes the difference for me. And it's still got 2 missiles, and usually if I'm firing 2 missiles and then getting them the hell out of there. So I'm gonna add the Barrack 2 as my other anti-air. Taking into account that a lot of these have long-range missiles. Along the bottom here, you've got some cheap options. You've got a cheap anti-air. I mean, you can use this against choppers. Why not? Good one to bring out early game to knock out enemy choppers. Basically suicide. I mean, that thing could quite happily suicide against some of the KA-50s and stuff. Then you got this one, which is a rocket attack jet. I mean, they're alright, but they don't really do a lot for me. You got napalm bombs, which again, I'm not really fussed by. And then you got this thing, which is a single 1,400 kilogram bomb, which is obviously huge, but its ECM is terrible. Its speed's pretty good, but I don't know. For the price, I think there are better options in other decks. So maybe skip that. I've still got 5.1 here. I'm going to take something because the aircraft here are really good. And do I accept that all of these Sparrows are enough for air superiority, or do I take another, you know, Baz or something like that for a cheap option for anti-air? Or do I take another bomber of some description? I mean, obviously the cluster bomber is tempting. 6 cluster bombs is very nice. It's got decent ECM at 30%. I mean, you could, couldn't you? That's really challenging. I wish there was another slot here, because I'd take the cluster and I'd take another anti-air. So the game here is going to be keeping the Barrack 2s alive. That's the game. That ram is going to really hurt stuff if those are accurate on fire and forget. There are so many nice options here. Let's try the cluster out. I'd really like to try the cluster. So there we go. So that's 53 points of 60. So we're going to go back and have a look through with our remaining 7 points. Logistics, I don't really need anything here, to be honest. Not for a 10v10 tactical. Obviously, if it wasn't 10v10 tactical, I'd take another command. Infantry, we're already full. Support is where we then say, well, do we take the artillery and we go aircraft artillery and tank heavy with this deck? That's a very expensive deck, though, for, you know, 10v10 tacticals. I mean, you're talking, we need to take something cheap then, don't we? So do we take this one? Its dispersion isn't great, but I mean, it would drive people bonkers. You could take that just to try it out with the napalm. This thing here, 120 points. That's 100. I'm looking for something that's not too expensive. So let's do that. It's 80 points. It's got a reasonable range. We can do some harassment with it. We'll try it out. I know it's not the best thing in the deck by any means. And you know what? Actually, let's take 3. And we'll take them hardened. And it does mean the dispersion will be a bit lower. So that's 56. We've got 4 points left. And we either take something that costs 3. I really don't want to take any more tanks. Recon, we could take 2 things that cost 2. Take a chopper. Take a chopper. Let's take something from the chopper and something from Recon. Because it's not going to hurt us to have more Recon. Let's take the ram with the anti-air option. 7 trained. We can just, you know, they're not super cheap, but they should be coming in handy for taking out choppers and a little bit of harassment of ground infantry. Good for base defense, things like that. And then let's take a helo. Let's just... Oh, I don't know. I've got so much expensive stuff in this deck. I really don't want to take that chopper. I really don't. I'm tempted. Let's take the rocket cobra. I think that's what we do. We take trained, and then if push comes to shove and we need to do a chopper spam at some point to kill infantry or whatever, then that is our option. Okay, fine. I'm semi-happy. A little bit unsure about the aircraft. I kind of want to build an airborne deck with this now. So I get all the planes. But yeah, let's have a quick look back through. So, logistics. We've got an infantry command, we've got a fob, we've got a truck and another truck. Fair enough. Infantry, we've got the spike, we've got the 15-man shock squad, which is well worth it. We've got these guys in the hammer, which are our elite troops. We've got the Roviat 90s for some cheap infantry spam. And we've got these guys because I'm really curious how effective they are with the Mark 19, along with a McCarver with a Mark 19. These should mince infantry. Support, we've gone for the Drakon, which is, you know, a reasonably obvious choice. We've gone for the Eyehawk, basically. We've gone for just some cheap mortars for smoking. We've gone for the Mar 290 because I want to try it more than anything else. And we've gone for a standard sort of 155mm artillery piece. Tanks, we've gone for the big McCarver Baz. We've gone for the other McCarver, the 3B. We've gone for this, which is 70 points, which is a bit of a glass cannon with high AP but low armor. And then we've got this, which is 40, which has reasonable armor, reasonable AP, and is going to be used for infantry support. Recon, we got the Bedouins. We've got 2 squads of Maglan, 1 in the hammer and 1 in the chopper. And then we've gone for the Ram for some anti-air protection against choppers. Then we've got vehicles. We've gone for the Pera, which is this Spike Enlos, which is a very long-range anti-tank missile. You get 24 missiles on there, so if you can keep it alive, it should do a lot of damage. But, you know, it's an investment. It's expensive. Helos, we've gone for 2 cheap options, just the Cobras. Aircraft, we've gone for the Kurnus 2000 with the Seed. We've gone for the standard Kurnus with the Hobos electro-optical missiles, which hurt. We've gone for the Lavi, which is 150-point carpet bomber, which is pretty good. We've gone for the Barak 2, which is basically an anti-air jet, but with only 2 missiles, but very good ECM. So fire, forget, get out. And then we've gone for the Nets as well, which has a lovely set of cluster bombs. Here I would either take the cluster bomber or another set of air superiority fighters. Either is probably a good choice. It depends how you're going to play the deck, and I kind of really want to build an airborne deck now. But we will see. Because the tanks are really... I'm struggling with this deck because it's got really good tanks, it's got really good air, and it's got really good support. But the infantry is a bit mediocre. The recon is very mediocre. So, I don't know. It's a weird deck. I don't feel it's exceptionally strong in one particular area, but there are definitely areas I feel it's weak. I think air is probably one of its strongest areas. But there's the deck. As I say, suggestions down below if you think I've taken something I shouldn't and something that's ineffective. I'm very curious because, as I say, I've not played it. I need to play a few games to see what it's like. But thanks for watching, everyone. Please do like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all soon for some more Wargame and Warner.